Traders, how are you? With Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Have a lot of big news in terms of the economic catastrophe that's literally coming. Mark Zuckerberg is now admitting that the recession that we're about to see is going to be one of the worst in recent history. We have countries now that are circumventing the US to be able to pay directly with other nations, this including Russia. And we even have other people like crypto firms that are just going belly up due to the crypto winter. Let's go ahead and get started. Overall, the arching kind of the worry this week is the high inflation. Obviously, costs are exploding for everybody. Credit card debt for consumers is exploding and reaching record highs. I'm going to explain that in just a moment. And the possible higher interest rates that could bring on the recession, which we theoretically are already in based on the real-time data from the Atlanta office from the central bank in the United States. The information of the recession, or the possible recession, I should say, came on the day after closing out the index's worst first half of any year since 1970 for the S&P 500. Hooray for Biden. All the markets in the United States were negative this week. Canada also negative. And then I'm going to read the quote that Zucks said, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. "If I had to bet, I'd say that this might be one of the worst downturns that we've seen in recent history." That was in a Q&A session with the weekly employees. Now, in addition to that, the market volatility, right? That's some negative news, right? But on the other hand, some positive news says that the last 5 weeks has seen record volatility going back since 1928. So if you don't know what volatility is, it's basically the range and movement in the stock market. So, they've just been going up and down, mostly down, but it's been going up and down, and it's the widest range that we've seen so far in terms of volatility. Over the last 80 years, the similar instability coincided with the end of a bear market. So what they're saying here is, might have a little bit more move to the upside. Now, and the bad news is that the credit card debt has exploded to $17.8 billion, and it went up by that much in April. Second highest amount ever, and it was the highest in March. So now April is the highest, and that was the highest when it was in March, which was $25.6 billion. So what this means is, remember that the consumer spending, especially in the United States, is the most important tongue twister. The consumer spending is the most important part of the economy. In the United States, it's almost 70% of the economy. So when we have a situation where consumers now are reaching record levels of debt, that indicates to us that's what's happening is that the higher prices are starting to eat into people's pockets. That means that they're starting to put everything on credit cards, things like food and essentials. And what's going to happen is those people are going to have less money to spend, to go buy a trip somewhere and go buy food at Chick-fil-A, all that stuff, right? And so if people stop doing those things, then the economy, 70% of the economy, is not going to be doing well. I'm going to give you some news here in just a moment about the housing market, which is 17 to 19% of the economy, and that's getting decimated due to the situation that we have with the recession and also the inflation and the increasing interest rates. So what does all this mean? The world is going to end. Go get yourself some popcorn. Everything's going to be okay. Just remember, I know it's a lot of negative news, but I just want to remind you that during the Depression in the 1920s, it was one of the best times to get rich. There was, listen to me carefully when I say this. There, at no point in history has there been more millionaires created than during the Great Depression in the 1920s. So a lot of negative news, but remember, there's always opportunity. And you guys know I've been in the markets for a while, trading, funding traders, training people, trading my own money. There's opportunity out there, whether you want to start a YouTube channel or learn how to trade, but just, take the steps in that direction and buy some food, because obviously we've had over 100 food plants that have been destroyed accidentally by fires and plane crashes, which I'm going to get to in just a moment. See that was a teaser. You like the transition? Overall for the market, Euro markets are mostly lower. Russia went down by over 8%. Latin America, mostly mixed. Africa and the Middle East, mostly mixed as well, with Egypt being the biggest loser. And then Africa and Australia, they were the mostly mixed as well, but it was more negative than positive, with Taiwan going down 6.69%. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency news. Everybody's going bankrupt in cryptos. Everybody. They're going bankrupt. They're not paying their bills. Crypto winter has officially arrived. A prominent crypto hedge fund called Three Arrows Capital filed for bankruptcy after defaulting on more than $670 million loan payment. Another company called Voyager Digital Ltd. announced suspension of trading deposits and withdrawals. BlockFi, also another company in the space, got backing from the brokerage firm called FTX, which is one of the biggest in the world. And this is what I always told you guys to be careful with when it comes to the crypto space. Not only is there manipulation because there isn't regulation. There's no regulation for the crypto market right now, but you don't see banks going bankrupt just because the stock market went down. You don't see brokerages going bankrupt. Now, it doesn't say that doesn't happen because it has happened before, right? But if we're in that situation, obviously we're going to have much bigger problems. So just be careful. You can obviously lose a lot of money. You can make a lot of money. There's high risk means high reward, but remember it means high risk also. So be careful with cryptos. Hackers stole over $100 million in crypto with a company called Horizon. This is a so-called blockcoin bridge, basically another bridge where you send and transfer the assets between two entities. And former millionaires in Bitcoin have now turned into long-term investors, obviously, because now over 80,000 people that were millionaires at the peak of Bitcoin in November, $68,789 was the high. Now over 108,000 of these Bitcoin addresses are not millionaires anymore. So hopefully they'll come back so you guys can say you're millionaires. We've had a nearly 60% drawdown since the end of March, largest since the third quarter in 2011. And for the week, Bitcoin is down 11.52%, just over 21,000. It's off about 79% from its high. And if you guys remember the chart I showed you last week, for what I expected it to do, it came down. So theoretically now we should see a little bit of a bounce before it decides whether it's going to continue going higher. I think I said it was 22 to 24. I think it was. Go to the week after last week. You guys will see it on there. Commodities, U.S. crude and Brent both down. And one of the things you guys ready for conspiracy, Marcello? 100 food processing plants have closed over the last year due to, quote, accidental fires. 2 of these plants over the last year had plane crashes. What is the likelihood of 1 plane crash, much less 2? Regulations, all kinds of stuff. But at the end of the day, over 100 have been closed. And I don't think it's a coincidence. Industrial metals also had their worst quarter since 2008 financial crisis. Worries between the recession. Obviously, if we have a situation where people are thinking we're going to get into a recession, a lot of speculation in the commodities are going to go down, right? Because we're not going to buy these things anymore. They're industrial metals because we use them in industry. Copper, for example, is one of the big ones. That's gone down 21%, which is its worst week since the 1980s crisis. 4 months. It was just at a record. And now literally everything has changed. In order for Russia to continue funding its revenue, it's going to have to look to fund it in a different way, even though I'm going to explain to you guys here in just a moment how Putin is playing chess while the West is playing checkers. They officially have banned the purchases of gold, the G7 countries. It's worth about $15 billion from Russia. So now they're sanctioning Russia where you can't buy their gold. But we have other entities and countries now that are scooping in to be able to go ahead and get the market that the West is literally just leaving there. India, for example, is one of the countries that started importing a ton of not only gold, but also oil. There's a company called Ultratech Cement, which is the largest cement company in India. They ordered a cargo of coal from Russia and they paid for it using Chinese yuan. Now, this is a really big problem because before we had what was called the U.S. homogeny. Almost got tongue twister there. I always record the Spanish videos first, so me tranco un poquito, tú me entiendes? If you guys speak Spanish. So what happens? Everybody had to buy gold. Everybody had to buy dollars in order to pay for something. So in this scenario, if India wanted to pay Russia for something, they would go out, buy the dollars, and then send the dollars to Russia. Now with the situation where the West and the U.S. is starting the situation with Russia, because in my opinion, the U.S. instigated it, now countries are starting to do business directly together. And U.S. homogeny is not going to be there anymore. The reason why the U.S. had power is because it had the US dollar and it could push people around with that. Very soon, people are moving in that direction where they're just not going to use the dollar anymore. So who's going to pay attention to the US? Now, whenever there's been a transfer of power, a transition, let's say from one country or one empire to another, The last 13 of the 16 times that that's happened, we've had war. So the last 13 times that we've had this kind of transition of power, from the British Empire to the US Empire or the Ottoman Empire, right? 13 of the last 16 times we've had a war. Something to think about. President Putin also said that the BRICS, which is think of it like a group, kind of like a club of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're saying that they're working on a new global reserve currency, which is going to be based on a currency basket of these 5 nations. There's a good economist named Jim Rickards, which I highly recommend you guys read his books and listen to the 1 hour videos that he has on YouTube. He talks about the new reserve currency being what's called SDRs, which is basically the currency of the IMF, or, the central bank of central banks. And so I'm just going to repeat this real quick. 1999, we had the dot-com bubble. We had a hedge fund collapse called long-term capital management. The Fed, instead of allowing this hedge fund to fail, a bunch of different banks in the United States and the West and Europe came in and bailed it out. So then the toxic assets literally went from just this hedge fund assets to all the bank's assets. Well, then we had the crisis in 2008 and 2009, where we also had the financial system collapse. What did the government do? Instead of allowing the banks to fail, they bailed them out. And now we have all the toxic assets on the government books. The next round is going to be the governments failing, because governments can never fail, right? Like the British, like the Romans. And now we're going to move kind of to the next level. Conspiracy Marcello is back. Welcome to the New World Order, where you'll own nothing and you're going to be happy. It's like the conspiracy hat off now. Russia government is also adding grain, sunflower seed, and extracted meal as a list of the exports that must be paid in rubles. So what did I mean by Russia's paying checkers while the West is paying chess, or backwards? Putin is being the smart one while the West isn't doing well. The ruble is the best performing currency in the world against the dollar. We had a collapse when all the sanctions and the war started. And then what Putin said is, well, if you want to buy my oil and natural gas, for example, that Europe needs, Europe being essentially the 3rd largest economy in the world after the United States and Russia and China, well, you're going to have to pay for it in rubles. So the demand for the rubles comes back up. He gets a ton of money because he's making a lot more money now than before. So now he's saying, oh, you want my grain too? Because of the food crisis that we're having, you're going to have to pay that in rubles too. You see how that works? So he has no problem continuing to fund his war. And you can see how literally what they're talking about sanctions and all this stuff they're going to do to Putin isn't working, because we need his oil and his food. Right? Because we're worried about the climate and we're shutting down pipelines in the United States instead of paying Canada, for example, for oil. Other than that, gold and silver, gold went down 0.73% to 1,814. Silver went down to 6.14% to 2001. This is an amazing opportunity. Remember, I'm not a trading advisor. I can't tell you guys where to get in and get out, but look into it, because I'm certainly looking into it. Financial and banking news. Russia has officially defaulted on its foreign currency sovereign debt for the first time since 1918. The sanctions from the West are not allowing them to buy dollars, for example, or euros to be able to go ahead and make those payments. Inflation data. Spain is at its highest level in 37 years at 10.2%. France is at 5.8. The Eurozone inflation is at a record high of 8.6. That's all of everybody in the European Union that uses euro. And German CPI, Consumer Price Index, is down to 8.2%. That actually went down compared to the previous months. United States dollar is the best quarter performance since quarter 4 in 2016. This is due obviously to the fears in the world about the recession, and also when the central bank increases the interest rates, what do people do? They take money out of risky assets, for example, like stocks, because stocks are variable. They go up and down. It's not a guaranteed return, right? So people take out the money from stocks, part of the reason why we're seeing this drop in the stock market. There's other reasons as well, but that's one of them. And then they invest in the US dollar, because now the US dollar can give them a guaranteed return, which is quote unquote unrisky. Conspiracy Marcello, until the dollar collapses. Regular Marcello is back. Political news, not too much going on in the political space. Economic news, the Atlanta Federal Reserve, which is the office of the Central Bank of the United States in Atlanta, tracks economic data in real time. And they're saying that the Q2 economic data was negative by a full 1%, which means that we are now technically in a recession. We had the first quarter, the first 3 months of the year at a negative return for the growth. And now we have another one as well. So yay, President Biden. Consumer sentiment in Germany slid to a record low in July. This is a problem because remember that consumer spending is the biggest part of the economy for any industrialized nation, including Germany. Germany being the fourth largest economy in the world, we can start to see the dominoes are starting to fall. Eurozone unemployment fell to a record low to 6.6%, lowest rate since going back to 1988. And US consumer spending, the largest economy in the world, and consumer spending being almost 70% of the economy in the US, fell for the first time this year. So consumers have record credit card debt. They're starting to not spend as much money. Things are going to get real soon. Corporate news, Robinhood shares soared. The epic, what I believe, scam that is Robinhood went up 14% after there were reportedly discussions that the big brokerage firm FTX was thinking about acquiring the app. Although they said that there's only discussions, they are actually going to do it. The revenue fell 43% during Q1 of this year, and they're even losing millions of users as well. Trade news, labor slowdowns and strikes in Germany and Dutch ports. It's going to make the supply chain situation worse. So some of you guys have even sent me stuff on Instagram where there's no baby food formula, even though that's the US's fault. There was the tampon shortage recently as well. Even I have a lot of real estate in the US, for example, to find things like a roof and a window and all these kinds of things. You're looking at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months delay. This is going to get worse due to the fact that we have these ports now that are having these problems in Germany and also the Netherlands, and that even cars, for example, are being shipped as well through those ports. So expect things to get worse when it comes to the supply chain. U.S. housing market is slowing amid the higher interest rates, the mortgage rates. Orders of home building construction materials and lumber are down. Shippers are also shipping less appliances, and even a major slowdown in the decoration orders for furniture and home decoration. So, kind of red flags are starting to go off in terms of the economy because things aren't getting better. They're actually getting worse. In technology, I mentioned those two already. Let me skip here. I lost my place. Give me 1 second. US importers also are dropping their imports from China manufacturing from 20 to 30%. So they're not ordering as much, which means that people aren't buying as much, which means that things are not bueno. Now, technology, huge container ships and huge freight planes make up the way that we live in our world economy. So if you buy something from China or India or, Germany, it usually comes through either a big boat with the containers or the freight planes, right? The planes that literally just flies materials back and forth. They can now be brought to a halt due to hackers. There was a company that called Hellman Worldwide Logistics said that they were impacted by a phishing attack. So just when we thought things couldn't get worse, the supply chain situation might actually get worse due to this new hacking risk. The EU agreed on a framework to eliminate carbon emissions from new cars and vans by 2035, effectively closing the chapter on the internal combustion engine. A lot of companies are already looking to make electric cars, cleaner fleets. And in investment news, Warren Buffett is buying another 9.9 million shares of Occidental Petroleum Corp, another oil company. Remember what I always taught you guys, that don't pay attention to what they say, like the talking idiots on CNBC. Pay attention to what they do. Why is Warren Buffett buying a record amount of an oil company? Think about that. Ken Griffin, which is the owner of Citadel, which is another huge scam, officially moved to Florida. He said that he's moving Chicago due to the crime-infested streets. There were riots, an employee got stabbed, and in addition to that, there was attempted hijacking of his own car. And guess where he's moving to? to the free state of Florida, baby, to Miami. Still got a little bit of freedom in Florida. Thank you, DeSantis. International events. The Western Military NATO organization is going to invite Finland and Sweden to be able to be part of NATO. Made after Turkey. Whoa, I just messed up my chair here. A deal was made with Turkey to be able to go ahead and accept them in after Turkey was talking about not letting them in. And conveniently, Turkey got some jets. They got some material for their. Nothing couldn't be connected though, right? No, there's no way that we would make a deal to give somebody military stuff to get something that we want in the U.S., right? No, not at all. And Putin responded that it's, he doesn't care that they join NATO, but if there's military infrastructure that's added to these countries, he's going to respond in kind. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to hit the like button. That hasn't gone up in price yet. And we'll see you next week.